Hello, and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just come back from seeing The Gentleman.
Yes.
New Guy Ritchie, Guns and Geezers.
Yes, that I had to drag you to, basically.
Not exactly, but you were looking forward to it more than I was.
Well, you were saying I wouldn't mind if I missed 45 minutes of the film.
Yeah. I didn't have high expectations. I mean, every now and again, Guy Ritchie's not a bad director, and I like some of his stuff, and I like some of his Guns and Geezers stuff. I really like Snatch.
Yes, I really liked...
Every now and again, he just seems he ploughs the old furrow that he made his name with, and apart from, to be fair, I've not actually seen Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, which was his first, but then there was Rock and Roller, Revolver.
I like Rock and Roller.
They've never been as good.
Revolver. No, I think... I
had a really bad time with Rock and Roller.
Well, I can't, to be honest, I can't differentiate between them very much. But I think...
well, that's one of the problems.
Well, no, that could also be a strength, because I've enjoyed all of them, So I think he's a great stylist. I think people criticize him because his films are trifles, and they're not seen to be serious, and they're not seen to be about very much. He's got a very, very distinctive style that some people find very annoying, but I don't. I like it. I think he's exciting and funny. I always have a good time in his films, even the bad ones, which I would argue this one is. It's still very enjoyable. I mean, I still had a good time.
I ended up having a good time.
Yeah.
I didn't like the framing device at the start. The framing device is Hugh Grant's journalist stroke private eye character goes to Charlie Hunnam, who is a sort of second-in-command gangster, asking him for $20 million, and he tells this story about everything he knows about Charlie Hunnam, his boss, Matthew McConaughey, their business, and blah, blah, blah. He's worked this all out, he's followed them, and he wants to shake them down for £20 million to basically keep the story private, keep it secret. And a lot of that, eventually that's going to come to something, right? That's going to develop eventually, that's going to become part of the main plot. But when it's used just as a framing device, and there's a long time it's used of, and now let's tell the next bit of the story, and now let's tell the next bit. It's just Charlie Hunnam looking annoyed, Hugh Grant saying something quite cheeky, a bit gay.
I loved Hugh Grant in this.
I didn't like a lot of his dialogue. I think it's, when he talks about wanting 20 million British pounds, as opposed to just pounds. No one talks like this. They only talk like this in Guy Ritchie movies.
That's
true.
I
found it quite annoying.
Okay, well, I don't. I enjoyed it. I loved Hugh Grant's performance. And actually, it's very interesting because, you think, well, what makes someone a star? And I'm not quite sure. But you see Matthew McConaughey, right? Like, full of charm and flair. And, he's just a pleasure to watch, constantly watchable. You look at Hugh Grant, who is the same, really. He no longer has his looks. Or, he's certainly no match in looks for McConaughey. But, he's relishing. He's free as a performer. He's enjoying. He's giving a really highly stylized, broad performance, and he's loving it, right? And actually, you partake in his pleasure in performing like that. Hunnam is a blank. Like, he's just empty screen,
Well, certainly in those framing parts, once he had his moment in the Junkie's flat, I felt he started to have a bit of presence.
Well,
he's not used well for a long time.
Well, I just think he's not good enough. Like, I just don't think he's a star, really.
Oh, he's not a star.
He doesn't compel attention. He's very handsome and so on and so forth. But actually, that's even worse because, he's so handsome and you're still not interested in looking at him.
Yeah. I suppose I should say before we go on, it is a film which has twists and turns in its plot. So, we are going to probably spoil a thing or two. So, there's your warning. Spoiler.
Yeah, I personally don't think any of that is really important.
People would still want the surprises to be surprises.
Well, fair enough. But, I just think in these Guy Ritchie films, the pleasure is all in the unfolding, really, They're quite sexist films. Yeah. All of them.
Go on.
Well, I think it's worth pointing out because, they are these male fantasies, really. And I personally, in a way, don't have any problem with male fantasies, right? Like, I mean, my problem always is that, you should have, like, half the films made by women, and then you get kind of female fantasies about their lives or their dreams or their hopes or whatever. So I don't particularly mind, that it's kind of, they're very male films. And actually, you could argue that the woman in it, even though she's got a very minor role, is a very strong, smart, cool woman, right? But she also feels like a male projection in some way.
Oh, yeah.
But it's that kind of film.
In some way. I mean, the 7-foot high stilettos, and she wears a jacket that's open basically all the way, and she's good with a gun, and she's sexy, and I mean, yeah, she is fantasy.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, she doesn't mind being raped almost. It's like, oh, hello, love, when her husband comes in to stop it. Jesus. I mean, that was... I didn't know what to make of that.
She's cool. But yeah, I think the films are so interesting because, on the one hand, part of the criticism of Guy Ritchie was always that really he was this posh boy trying to pass for Cockney. Yeah. And I thought, we were talking earlier about how the film was originally meant to be called Tough Guys, Toff.
Yes, that's one of the working titles for it.
And actually I thought that's such an interesting term because in a way, it combines both things, the idea of a tough guy, but also the idea of a toffee-nosed, it's both, right? And actually I think his films are so interesting because they project a particular idea of Englishness, right? That's very specific to these films, and that nonetheless I feel is quite democratic,
Okay.
Because it always mixes in kind of gangsters and aristocrats, and often you can't tell who's who and what's what, right? Like, kind of, they are all one. So actually, they are democratic in that sense that, like, every type of Englishman fits into this world, right? Like, and actually the main distinctions aren't class or isn't class, but smarts, right?
Yeah.
And I also think that there's an aspirational thing because everybody's stylish in Guy Ritchie films. For example, Colin Farrell in this one, right, who's meant to be like a boxing trainer.
Yeah.
Or,
he's not a gangster at all. He's a guy who coaches underprivileged youths.
That's right.
Boxing.
But you see how even all those underprivileged youths, they're dressed in a particular way, which is different than the beautifully cut suits that Matthew McConaughey wears, but still very stylish, right? They're all like plaid jumpsuits or, they look fantastic. And actually, I think everybody in a Guy Ritchie film looks fantastic,
Yeah.
And then there's a real pleasure in that. Like, I like the way that people look. I like the stylishness of the rhythms of the things, the areas where the films are set, from posh houses to fishmongers.
The worlds that he builds, at least in this, feel very complete and rich. And you understand the worlds that they move through. And I agree. I like that. And I like them visually.
I love them visually. They have a real rhythm and excitement and they move well,
What you're talking about with class is interesting because the central character in this is Matthew McConaughey, I'd say. It's an ensemble, but...
Yeah,
probably
Matthew McConaughey is
Matthew
the star.
McConaughey sits at the top of the film. He's the star.
Yeah.
And he's the crime boss who's trying to sell his weed empire for £400 million. And
he's a working class American.
He's a working class American. It's pointed out in a flashback. He came from like a trailer park, managed to make it to Oxford University on the basis of his smarts. And when at Oxford, started selling drugs, blah, blah, blah. He made it to the top. And he's someone who, his story is all about moving through different circles and knowing how to negotiate these different circles. So it's not like it's not about class. He knows how to navigate these different classes.
Yes.
And I think that's interesting because, the title being The Gentleman is interesting because, it strikes me as kind of a boring title in some sense, but this film is devoid of, or largely devoid of, the kind of gangsters that we've seen in his previous films, the real working class ones, or at least where they show up in here, they're not main characters as they used to be. When you think
but that
about...
milieu is still here. You still get that, the working class kind of gangsters. You see that with the kids with the phones and the estate, and
they're not gangsters though. They're a street gang. I'm talking about the kind of Statham.
Oh, yes.
When you think about Jason Statham in Revolver and Snatch, he was a working class organised gangster. These aren't people you see here. This is kind of high level organised crime you're seeing here, and there is a negotiation with the upper class and with the kind of style. So like I don't think you'd say any important character here is anything lower than middle class.
Well, but I would, because it's clear that McConaughey isn't, right? He's a trailer park guy. The Hugh Grant character, is clearly like a working class journalist,
maybe they came from a certain place, but they're all operating in this different world.
The point is that in England, everything is about the place you come from. Yeah, and it's always held against you, no matter which direction you're in. It actually is not about becoming. It's not, that you might have this job or have this money. It's not inconsequential, but fundamentally, you're still seen as like, the East Ender who made millions or whatever, right? You kind of class is absolutely important in this culture. And the focus is always on the place you're from. And actually, kind of, Guy Ritchie's films I don't think are like that at all.
Well, I was going to say, do you think that's true of Matthew McConaughey's character? It's mentioned where he comes from. But is that how characters think about him now, as the guy who came from there? I don't think it is.
Well, I think it's significant that he's American for these readings, right? But nonetheless, it's also important that he aspires to be a gentleman. Right, kind of, that's what the film is about, right? His attempting to kind of let go of, the criminal world and just kind of, have that kind of life. I think it's also important that all of the lords and ladies in the big estates are all seen as criminals, right? Like, so kind of criminality is something that they all have in common, really. So I think there is a kind of, a democratic or a democratizing aspect in all of Guy Ritchie's narratives, that kind of border on crime. That, yes, some people might be working class, some people might be rich, but kind of how they function within the narratives in relation to each other is what's important. And they're all beautifully dressed, and often, it's significant, I think. Because that is also an aspect of English culture. This emphasis on style, design, how kind of, how important it is to people, the attention that people pay to clothes. I mean, when I first came to England, I thought it's so interesting because, men in Canada would go and get their hair cut, whereas men in England would go get a haircut, right? Like, often very precise, like it really matters, kind of how you wear your hair, And people often, if you talk to friends, like they'll remember this particular shirt that they wore when they were 22, like this... style. I'm not saying that everybody is obsessed like that, but it's an aspect of the culture. Yeah, it's significant in the culture, and I think kind of you see it it's very evident in Guy Ritchie's films.
Do you think more could have been made of that here? Because it's in the set dressing and the kind of character and world design, but I would say it's still not something that things are really about. So you talk about Matthew McConaughey's character's aspiration to live like a gentleman, and he has that, but I don't think you ever really see it in any concrete, or in any explicit terms, as him trying to rise above his station or leave that world behind.
I don't think it's about rising above his station or anything. It's about, having the life he wants, right? Which is now, he's obviously adapted in some ways. Like, my God, his suits are beautiful, right? And also, they're very English. They're always like patterned or tweeds or...
Yes,
It's not just like the black suits that you see in American
some of his language
films.
as well, has English, British slang in it too. So he has that kind of adaptation.
Yes. It's very interesting, because I saw The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and I remember coming out of it so disappointed. That kind of, it didn't have the spark that I wanted. It was enjoyable, but, and then I found every time it appears on TV, I would watch it, and I liked it more and more and more. It's like kind of, it's artificial, it's all about style, but it's so well done and so enjoyable, and actually it gets better and better with each viewing. I've come to, I think he's a major stylist. His films are absolutely distinctive, absolutely enjoyable, they're really stylish. And I think, it's this thing, well, what are they about? Right? Like, well, they're about male fantasies in a way, right? And there might be all kinds of problems with that, right? But I get a great pleasure out of watching them.
It kind of occurred to me the whole way through that, and it occurred to me both while I was having a bad time and while I was having a good time, that, we sometimes think about films with specific audiences and how, well, maybe we're not seeing what the people it's aimed at are seeing.
Oh, that's interesting, yes.
And there are definitely people for whom this kind of cinema is the only cinema they watch, and it's the only, and they think this is great filmmaking. taxi drivers in London.
Again,
And there was definitely a huge part of this audience that was really responding to this
to
film.
everything in it. Again, this is why it's such a pleasure to actually go to the cinema, because actually, I think what you're describing, that these films might not be aimed at us, but actually, I think being at the cinema with people who it is aimed at and who are responding the way that they did helps you understand the films better. And I think this was a specific instance. It was actually quite a crowded cinema.
Yeah, really crowded.
And people were very, very, very responsive to everything.
First day of release, isn't it? 'Cause it's New Year's Day today, and it was a 6:20 screening. So it got the audience in.
It got the audience in, and it was so clever. I mean, all of that thing about we're talking about old-fashioned analog, right? And then kind of you get the images. With a grain, like they described, and then, in an anamorphic format, which is, and then the screen expands, and, that was so much fun.
I didn't think that was clever or fun.
I thought that was fun.
I thought that was trying to look like it was clever and fun. I thought that was crap. That's right at the start, and I really was having a bad time at the start with Hugh Grant's dialogue and how he was, he has this kind of florid dialogue where he'll go into these little sidebars, like you say, with talking about the story I'm going to tell you is in widescreen and all this shit. And clearly it speaks to the confidence that the character feels. Like he thinks he's on top and he can spin this story for as long as he likes and get his 20 million. So, it's not like it's irrelevant to the character or story being told. But I did think it was also... we always get it with people like Guy Ritchie or maybe Quentin Tarantino who kind of overwrite their characters occasionally. They're in love with their own dialogue so much. I've had a feeling of that with some of this.
Well, I mean, let me tell you, Guy Ritchie's dialogue is not a patch on Tarantino's.
But he knows what his audience likes.
Yes.
And that's to an extent what I'm talking about with there is an audience for this that is quite specific. That audience responds to this kind of thing.
Well, they clearly did. I think I've now seen all his films except Swept Away. And I've enjoyed all of them. And this is very much a Guy Ritchie film.
Yeah, down to the sort of entirely nondescript trailer full of, here's a gangster, and here's a guy with a gun, and here's someone trying to shake someone down, and here's just a load of guys in London. There's going to be a Russian, there's going to be some Chinese. Yeah. I mean, it couldn't be sort of more...
cliched.
Yeah, exactly.
It is. This is like, let's be clear. I think this is not a great movie by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. But I think it's a very interesting one. I found it very enjoyable. And I really do think that Guy Ritchie's underrated. And I will go even further. I think 20 years from now, when people begin to speak about, the late 90s and the 10s, I think his films will be as memorable and as live as any other British filmmaking of that period. Big words.
You're probably right. They certainly speak to a kind of culture and generation. They speak to their own time.
They do. And, and they evoke it and they characterize it in a way. And also he's got an eye for actors and acting. And, I think a lot of people made his career with him. I mean, Statham is one of them. And who's the other? Tom Hardy got his start with him. Yes, in I don't know whether it was Revolver or Lock, Stock. He played a gay gangster.
Oh, right.
In one of his films.
Was that Rock and Roller?
It might be Rock and Roller.
Stephen Graham, maybe. You might argue. I don't know if Stephen Graham was big before Snatch, but he had a good role in Snatch.
Yeah,
a memorable one. He was Handsome Bob in Rock and Roller. And the same year, Bronson, which was, a big star turn as well.
Yeah.
That's Tom Hardy, that is, obviously.
I remember when Vinnie Jones was big, that was from Lock, Stock.
Well, that's what turned Vinnie Jones into an actor.
Yeah. And I love Jason Fleming. And, I don't like Gerard Butler, but...
Gerard Butler.
But that was Rock and Roller. And then he did the Sherlock Holmes films, which actually I don't think much of.
Oh, they're quite good fun, I think. They've definitely got that sense of style that you look for with his work. Yeah. But you're right. He has got an eye for actors and ability to work with them, and he's good at casting.
Yes,
puts people in all the right roles in this.
Yes, and he clearly takes pleasure in actors. To give the type of leeway that he gave Brad Pitt in Snatch or Hugh Grant here, it's just that was very good, really.
I wasn't a huge fan of the casual homophobia that kind of ran through the film, which is not the first time we've seen it in one of his films.
I didn't remark on it this time. I mean, I thought that was just kind of part of Hugh Grant's character, really.
Yeah, this occurs to me. You sometimes will say about these characters, well, the reason that they said a homophobic thing, which actually is not his character. I can't remember who it was, but there was someone who made the odd homophobic comment, and you go, well, it's because the character's a bad person, but that's not really what we're being asked to respond to. We're being asked to respond to a comically homophobic comment that a character makes.
I must say,
or for instance, the bit where the one character in the ring, it's a minor moment, calls a black character a black cunt, and they're sort of mates, and he says, "Get in the ring, you black cunt." And then they have this little question about, did he just call me a black cunt?
Yes.
He says, well, yes, you're black and you're a cunt, and it's very funny. But it's like, actually, some people do think that that like it's okay to call someone a black cunt because you're not being racist. It's like because you're black. Well, no, that is still racist. Some people do think like that, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. I think I don't know. I don't like that. And with the Hugh Grant character, who, it's never actually stated whether he's gay or not, but he's
it's shown.
Yeah,
so
but
clear.
The thing was, what occurred as a possibility to me is that he's someone who's just very devilishly playful and likes making comments of that nature.
No. I think,
I think
no,
it
I
probably
think
is
clear.
that he's just gay.
I'll wank in your handkerchief.
Yeah, but I mean, I've said that, and I'm pretty sure I'm not gay.
The putting the hand on the thigh and all.
I
of
do that to Matt all the time.
Well,
shit, maybe I'm gay. No, you know what I mean though. Like, it could be someone who's
no. You get the sense. You clearly get the sense that Hugh Grant is gay in this.
But the thing is, then, if that is who he is, why make him so predatory?
Well, but
why make that into his defining characteristic? Really?
Well, I know. I think his defining characteristic is, he's a greedy blackmailer. Out for a buck.
Oh,
So. Yeah, and I don't mind. Yeah,
I don't really see the purpose in that character trait, because that's all it's really inviting us to do is laugh at the. Yeah, I didn't like it.
Okay, well, I didn't mind it. So.
No, fair enough. Well, no, you liked it.
Yeah,
see, you responded quite a lot to the film.
Yeah.
So did I. I laughed quite a bit. Like I say, I did end up enjoying it. I had a bad time for the start because I thought, this is just the same old fucking shit that we see all the time with Guy Ritchie. His characters aren't very interesting. Despite an interesting kind of performance here and there, I think McConaughey really captures the
McConaughey was wonderful.
Screen. But it was only when it got to the junkie flat and the introduction of Colin Farrell that
I loved Colin Farrell.
Thought things started to cohere and have a bit of style. And you also had those were two scenes where characters had moments, and they had not exactly monologues, but they were the centre of scenes.
Yes.
Farrell and Charlie Hunnam in those, and so that's when I thought things started to perk up. And then I did also become interested in the development of the plot and how these various interests were starting to collide, what people knew about each other, how the story would end up resolving. I started to get interested in that. So,
yes.
It made a success of what I thought was a bad start.
Yes. Well, I enjoyed it more than I thought I would.
And I could watch it twice when it shows up on TV.
And I'm sure I will. And actually, that is, I was just saying that about The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and, because at the end of the film there's a poster of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Yeah, in the office. I don't know if you noticed.
And it's a very clever ending.
Well, it's not such a clever ending, but but I thought it was interesting because obviously it was not a hit, but it's clearly a film that he's proud enough of to remind people of in the closing of this film.
Yeah.
And I think if you catch it again on television or Netflix or wherever, you'll see why. I mean, it is
The Man from U.N.C.L.E. It is on Netflix, I think.
Yeah, it's really kind of wonderful to see. So
it's a good movie. Easily forgettable, but then when it shows up again, you go, "Ooh, this was good."
Yes,
which is exactly what I thought when I watched Star Trek again last night. I thought, why did I not watch this since 2009? It's brilliant.
Well,
which has got nothing to do with Guy Ritchie, but it's just one of those things.
Yes.
God, I forgot this was good.
Yes.
So this was all right.
Okay.
It's not his best, but I also don't think it's his worst. I mean, his worst. Well, I haven't seen Swept Away, but I had such a horrible time with Rock and Roller, and Revolver's just on another planet of weird hubris.
Yeah, I think the only one that I didn't like that much was the Gerard Butler one.
Which one was that?
I can't get them. I can't separate them really. It's
Not King Arthur, surely. Was it?
no. I have
Arthur?
also seen King Arthur, which I
Yeah,
also
no,
quite
go
like.
Rock and Roller was Gerard Butler.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's my least favorite of, that cycle, that early cycle. All right.
Yes, and this is sort of better than I expected, and the actors really make it work.
So thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Spotify. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter. The website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com. And leave us a rating or a comment or something like that. Apparently that helps.
Yes.
I never remembered to say that, but there you go.
Well, that's very good. All right.
See you later.
Bye bye.